The reason we're doing this is to hopefully bring a little richer media to you guys and get some video content quickly up and out. And for those of you catching this on recording, probably you missed the 3 minutes of technical difficulty. Thanks to Jake Kuhn. Thanks to him in advance for all of his help with getting recordings up of these calls. The reason we are here today is because I've made it a personal objective to increase my ability to have more effective conversations, and specifically in the coaching style of communication. That's a topic that I didn't know very much about. I've been exposed to. For those of you who were at SLC, Greg Salchicoli, who spoke as a keynote speaker there 2 SLCs ago, talked about the power of a coaching leader. And all I can tell you is long before that message was given, Trent Booth has been coaching people to success in our company at many different levels of the business. So I know Trent speaks with top CSPs, division managers, district managers, up-and-comers, and he's really able to help people move forward at all different levels of the business. And he's an excellent communicator, an excellent person. And I think what's cool about today is that he's inviting, he's allowing us to invite, I should say, people to listen in to a live conversation here, because what I'm going to be doing is asking Trent some questions. And if you have questions or whatever it might be, feel free to post them in the boss group, either during or after the call. If you hear something you like and want to quote, feel free to also put that in the same place. You can even just pull up another tab now as you're doing it. So without further ado, Trent, are we ready to roll?
We're ready. It's like we've got 5 viewers already.
All right. Well, let's do this then. The questions I'd like to start with here, Trent, is I think an appropriate question to start is, how would you define coaching exactly? How would I know if I'm coaching a rep or managing a rep or doing something else?
It's a good question. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there when it comes to what coaching is and what coaching isn't. In fact, for a number of years, I would have one-on-one calls with people in our company, and I wasn't initially calling it coaching, but that's kind of what we called it. If we're getting regular, intentional one-on-one time together, we were calling it coaching. And as I went a little deeper in my study in terms of what it is, what coaching isn't, a lot of the times what we're doing and what we're calling coaching is actually mentoring. Mentoring would involve one-on-one conversations. I think we're all familiar with the term mentoring, usually within the context of somebody that's a little further up the road than me, kind of getting time with me. And it can be kind of organic and just kind of natural. It could also be really contrived, though, and really kind of intentional and specific and one-on-one. That being said, it's also, mentoring involves a lot of directive type teaching of, hey, I hear what you're saying, and in my experience, this is what that has meant, or hey, perhaps you could consider something like this. And in fact, for a number of years, I'm going to say for about 7 or even 8 years, I've been mentoring people intentionally one-on-one. These conversations have yielded a lot of fruit. In fact, a lot of those conversations even felt a lot like what even would be called traditional coaching, in the sense that the person that I'm speaking with would be usually driving the agenda, certainly from a perspective of me at least asking the question, hey, what do you want to talk about today? So as I get into that question, hey, what do you want to talk about today? That's allowing the participant to kind of drive the agenda, so to speak. That being said, is that I still wasn't afraid of getting into directive teaching as a really legitimate way of getting a point across, or even the responsibility was larger than mine as the mentor to kind of keep moving the plot forward. That being said, coaching actually has 4 basic foundational pillars that really differentiate it from mentoring. And the 4 are very simple. The first one is that the participant, the mentee or the coachee in this case, is inherently creative, resourceful, and whole. In other words, the participant already probably has the answer lying within them. And my job as a coach isn't even to necessarily have experience in what it is that they're working through, so much as to be able to ask the right questions to help the participant become consciously aware of what it is that they already know how to do. So a case in point might be like when you call somebody and you have this challenge or problem, and you explain it to them, and as you explain it to them, they actually you solve it yourself. Like, oh, never mind, this is it. So you actually had the solution within you, and you didn't even know it until you were articulating the challenge of the problem, in which case you solved it yourself. So that would be a case of self-coaching. Qualitative coaching that would really key in more here and would basically really cling to the fact that the person that I'm talking to, they can figure it out. They can work it out. They're creative. They've got vast resources that they're not even really aware of. Broken. They're already whole. There's nothing for me to, as a coach, have to fix, so to speak. The second foundational principle, beyond the fact that the participant is creative and resourceful and whole, is the fact that professional coaching addresses the participant's whole life. It actually addresses the whole person. So in certain cases, when I'm talking with somebody, they might say, well, hey, my challenge really here is relational. Hey, my problem here is I've got a broken relationship here. And as we're talking here, they might be asking for relational coaching, but really the problem as I dig in with the person might be finances. And the reality is that there's a lot of people call themselves CEO type coaching or executive coaching or food coaching. The reality is coaching, professional coaching, addresses the participant's whole life. So there's really not one topic that would necessarily be off the table. The idea is that one of those areas really does affect all of the other areas as well. So coaching would necessarily really demand that all of those topics would need to be on the table. So it's the whole life. It's not like I'm just going to try and coach you here on your relationships. We're going to take a look at things like your health. We're going to take a look at things like even your faith as it relates to those other areas. The third thing is that the agenda really does come from the participant. And I realize that the question that you're asking here might be more along the lines of, hey, if I'm in I've got a rep here that I'm trying to coach. I'm just more trying to start with, I guess, a pure definition of what qualitative coaching would be. But the third is really that the agenda comes from the participant. And when I say that, the participant has the responsibility of actually coming up with the agenda. In other words, what we're going to talk about today. So when I was doing a lot of mentoring, I might ask the question, hey, what do you want to talk about today? And that wasn't a question I often asked as a district manager. I often assumed as a district manager. I would say they're struggling with leads, and I would assume the best remedy for their problem. And I would hear maybe the start of an explanation and immediately deduct where we should go, which unfortunately led, I think, a lot to me misdiagnosing because I didn't have enough information. The reality is not only am I asking the question here, it's not enough for the participant to say, oh, I don't know, whatever you want to talk about is fine with me. The reality is that for the coaching experience to go well, in fact, for it to even get anywhere, it has to come from the client. It has to come from the participant. It has to come straight from them. Now, as a coach, I can ask questions that might be able to help them identify where they're stuck or logged in, or maybe what some of their crises are. In fact, very often they'll present, hey, here's what I think I'd like to talk about today. And as we dig deeper into getting into the reality or bothering them, we identify that it's actually something else. But at least that agenda is coming from the participant and not from me. And hear me right, that means that I'm not showing up ahead of the time saying, hey, here's what I'm trying to establish during this call. So there's certain aspects of this that even might not totally be appropriate for a DM rep relationship, because there certainly are times where an agenda is brought by the district manager, and that's not only okay, that's appropriate in terms of trying to advance the plot for this person here. But for qualitative coaching, the agenda really does need to come from the participant. And I will say this, I believe that district managers would benefit greatly by when they sit down with a rep, with an AM, the DM candidate, that they really do have that candidate think ahead of time about what they would like to discuss, what they'd like to work through. The reality is that is much more relevant than anything I could possibly bring. It's going to be stickier when I address topics that they are particularly interested in working through. In fact, you're probably surprised how often it's the same. Your topic is the same as theirs, but when they bring it and it's their agenda, they're much more invested in coming up with the right solutions. This also does not only shift responsibility on them to drive the agenda, it also allows them the dignity of having responsibility and accountability for the solutions as well. So I said there's 4 foundational pillars of qualitative coaching. The first is that the participant is inherently creative, resourceful, and whole. The second is that the professional coaching addresses the whole life. not one particular area here. And the third is that the agenda comes from the participant. The final pillar is really that the relationship is a designed alliance. It's a designed alliance. In other words, sometimes accountability relationships haven't worked. You know, I've asked somebody to hold me accountable, and the reality is they don't ask the difficult questions because maybe something isn't great in their life, and they're like, hey, if I ask Trent, then he's going to ask me about this. So accountability can often break down in that type of a scenario. The reality is in a coaching relationship, the coach needs to be radically sold out to the participant's success, thinking constantly about how to be able to move that participant forward. The coach is basically feeding the relationship, but they're not looking to pull necessarily anything out of the relationship. All of the power really goes to the coaching relationship and then ultimately to the participant. It's a designed alliance. It's really very unique in that sense as well. Some other thoughts on designed alliance. Just checking my notes here. There we go. Oh, I've lost my notes here. But basically, at the end of the day, it's a very unique type of relationship here. Much more different than even any of the mentoring type of relationships that I've had, and certainly the other relationships where I'm trying to get something out of it as well. It's more transactional. I'm actually making deposits without any expectation of making withdrawal. And that in a coaching relationship is very unique and very different from a lot of the other type of relationships that are out there. So I'm not sure if I hit your question exactly here, Andrew. So I'm going to come up for air here, give you an opportunity to repose it just in case I can come at from another angle.
Yeah, and Trent, I'm going to be posting my notes here in the Facebook group. Anybody watching, whether it's live or recording, I encourage you to stay in. But this is very helpful for me in that what I'm picking up, and I'll go quick here because I've got other questions to get to, but if we think about it as simply as two different approaches, one being mentoring, which is directed, initiated, by the coach, manager, however you want to view that, person A. Whereas in coaching, it's initiated. The agenda, point number 3, is coming from the participant. They're responsible for it. And in order for it to really happen, they've got to be prepared, or if they come unprepared, then, the coach needs to work through to help them, or give them the time to figure out what they want to talk about, because, the purpose of that being that they're more invested in making the change. In order for that to work, the recipient has to be whole, creative, resourceful. The 3 things I've heard. In order for that to successfully happen, they've got to come. That's who's got to be showing up. And as a coach, you accept not just a particular area. Even if that's what somebody comes to you as a coach, maybe saying, "Hey, I want to improve my performance in this very specific area." The coach has to be open and listening for what's happening all around that, maybe even underneath that, or outside that conversation, because you're taking on the whole person, and as a coach, you're totally sold out to that whole person. The design alliance you're talking about at the end there, as opposed to getting something or saying, "Hey, I'll hold you accountable, you hold me accountable," we're kind of bill buddies or something like that. It's a intentional partnership, is what I'm hearing.
You got it.
So,
in fact, the basic idea here is that the participant is just as responsible for creating that powerful relationship that fits within their working style, their learning style, as much as the coach is. So if they've identified, "Hey, I really like it when you do this," or, "Hey, when you've done this with me, it hasn't spoken to me as much in the past." So when a participant is identifying things that are working, it is absolutely their responsibility to communicate that to the coach. So there's a mutual responsibility in both the coach and the participant for the design of the alliance right from the beginning. It's important for clients to really feel like they're in control of the relationship, and they're achieving the changes that they would like to make in their lives. They're making the progress. The miracle is really coming from them. So very often in Vector we say, hey, fish for a person, you feed them today, teach a person to fish, and you feed them forever. I think we pay lip service to the idea that I'm teaching you how to fish, whereas coaching would legitimately be saying, hey, what do you want to do? And asking enough questions so the person figures out on their own how to fish. That might be the simplest way to explain it.
Yeah. And maybe it's familiar with that analogy. That gets some great, at least for me, new perspective on it. Very cool. I think to move forward here from this point a little bit is a thought I have is if I'm talking to a representative or receptionist or assistant manager candidate, whoever it might be, I often find myself like the light bulb goes off once I feel like I've reached the point of understanding what's happening. You know, my brain is searching for solutions more naturally than questions. I'm trying to find the answer. You know, more so, to provide that person. And I feel kind of, maybe you could call it a sense of urgency in the conversation. And I find difficulty having the patience sometimes to ask the question to guide somebody through that process. What do you do as a coach? What have you found helpful? To stay in coaching mode, I guess would be the best way I can describe it.
Sure.
Or when is it appropriate to out of coaching mode?
Great question. So if I hear you right, Andrew, it's basically something to the effect of, I want to be more of a coaching leader. I'm talking to somebody on the phone. Let's say they've got a challenge, they've got a problem, and I really want to get directive in terms of I see a solution, I see a fix, and I want to be results oriented right now and just fix it with them. Is kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that kind of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. First is recognizing that, okay, if in this moment here I fix their problem, ultimately the responsibility for their progress now is shifted to me, not them. And while this might be good short term and we might get some results right now, unfortunately, the next time that they have a problem or challenge, we are reinforcing them coming back to me. One of the challenges with the way that we learn in our society is that we're often not taught how to think. We are taught precisely what to think. And you can think about all the directions where that can end very badly in a relationship. So, for example, somebody says to me, hey, can you just tell me what to do here? And most times even district managers are reticent to just tell them what to do. They know that that's fraught with risk. But that being said, is on some of the lower hanging fruit, we'll just take charge and direct them and work through. But what we do is we create a needy type of relationship. It's not even codependent. They're just totally dependent on me. And in fact, it eliminates and draws power away from them and actually puts power back in my court. This is difficult because we're kind of used to, we've seen this, first of all. Right? We've seen this with our leaders. They've told us what to think. And we got results and they got results, so it felt good. The reality is, when I can get curious as a coach and ask them enough questions, the reality is they often will figure it out on their own. And when they figure it out on their own, they did it. The miracle lies with them. The responsibility lied with them. But that also means that the victory was theirs too. And even though they may face different challenges in the future, they can still engage in the process. And every time that they do this, they actually gain confidence, gain more satisfaction, and they basically gain some muscles in terms of being able to problem solve on their own. Let me give you an example, because there are a couple of different tests, let's call them, that were done in the 70s. One is they took a group of coaches, traditional coaches, and took them into a tennis school. In this tennis school, they took all of the tennis coaches and actually put these qualitative coaches in with the participants. And just by asking questions, say, hey, what do you think you need to do there? You notice that the ball is landing out a lot. What do you think you need to do to adjust? By asking the right questions and helping the participants become consciously aware of what they were working through, they were still able to make progress, every bit as much as if they had an actual tennis coach there. What was fascinating is the vast majority of those people not only were not experts in tennis, some of them had never even played, but being able to ask the right questions and helping the participants think it through, they were still able to make progress. A totally separate and independent study was done in Europe, again in the 70s, where they took the same type of coaches and took them to a ski instructor school, a ski school where they took the instructors out, again, great skiers that may or may not be great teachers, but great skiers trying to get people to learn how to ski. And basically, again, by asking the right questions, basically working from an assumption that this person, again, is creative, they're resourceful, they're whole, somebody figured out how to ski for the first time. And so by asking the right questions, can they figure out how to ski, at least to a rudimentary level where they'd be at least safe, going down the bunny hill, for example. So I decided to test this out on my daughter, do a little human testing at home. And in learning how to swing a golf club, for example, when I learned how to golf, it usually involved very directive type teaching, where my dad was like, do this, don't do that, swing back, keep your head down, keep your arms straight, keep your legs in, make sure you don't lead with your hips, go. And it was like drinking from the fire hose. I literally remember just being all locked up and getting more and more uncomfortable as I kept swinging at that stupid ball and not being able to hit it. My dad getting frustrated because he didn't know how to teach me, or at least I wasn't getting it. And it was just, it's amazing I even like the sport today. So with my daughter, I decided to try more of a coaching approach, and with questions, see if I could get greater breakthroughs with her. So one of the things we did is I swung the glove a few times, hit a few balls out. I said, okay, now what do you want to do? She says, well, I want to hit the golf ball. I said, show me. So she swung and completely whiffed, totally missed the ball. I said, what happened? She said, well, I missed the ball. I said, what do you think caused you to miss the ball? She said, I looked up to see where the ball was going to go. I said, but you didn't hit the ball. She says, oh, and you can see a little light bulb go off. Now, what I was tempted to say was, oh, you lifted your head. She doesn't even know what lifted my head means. She has no context or frame of reference for that. As she's learning this, she basically had, at first, unconscious incompetence. She didn't even know how to swing a golf club. She didn't even know it was a thing. As we started walking up to the driving range, she becomes consciously incompetent. She knows that she does not know how to do what all these people up and down swinging golf clubs are doing. She doesn't know how to do it. So as she continues to go forward, and watching me and what I was doing, by asking questions, I was helping her become consciously aware of what she might need to do to make adjustments. And because I was asking her those questions, any adjustments that came from her were from within, so they were in terms that she totally understood. She said, I looked up to see where the ball went. I would have used terms like, you're lifting your head. But then I could use her terms. I said, well, you looked up to see where the ball went, but you didn't hit the ball. What do you think you might need to do differently so that you actually hit the ball this time? She says, I need to look at the ball. Now, I would have said, keep your eye on the ball, but she said, I need to look at the ball. I says, okay, show me. So she swings again, really hard, and catches the top part of it. And I said, what happened? She says, well, I didn't hit it very well. I said, I didn't ask what didn't happen. What did happen different than last time? She says, well, I hit the ball a little bit and went 3 feet. I said, so when I say, what do you want to do? And you said, I want to hit the ball. How do you want to hit the ball? How did you hit it so that it actually skipped away? Let me try and shorten this long story. By asking her a lot of these questions, and then by showing her again, by taking a few cuts and saying, okay, watch my arms and see what I'm doing. Am I swinging hard? No. She was able to cut a lot of that conscious incompetence part out and is able to actually become more consciously competent very quickly. Part of it was because the breakthroughs were hers. Anything that she was learning was stickier because it came from her own mind. And frankly, the process was much more enjoyable and even satisfying for her because she was making the true progress. It wasn't me that was the miracle. It was her. Oh, and she made more progress than anybody else in her class that day. She was 11 years old at the time. And even when we went back a couple years later, she had retained much of the content and was swinging the club pretty well, which is amazing. So just a little home experiment that went pretty well.
Yeah. What excellent and thorough example. And, Trent, I guess, as somebody who's played a lot of golf in the way I was quote-unquote coached, I guess, is that really coaching? I would have people lay the club down, put your feet discomfort, like putting a club on my head to keep it still to avoid the same mistake. You know, and just through repetition, I guess, of the muscle memory, was able to develop skill that way. What I appreciate about your story is showing that's not the only way to get there. And in fact, there may even be some retention of good habits because it's coming from within, is what I'm hearing.
You know, and I unpacked basically 3 of the 4 stages of learning. So I said we started first at the quadrant would be unconscious incompetence. I don't even know it's a thing. I'm not even aware of it. The second one I said was conscious incompetence. I now know that I do not know how to swing a golf club, or maybe a different analogy would be driving a car. So you know, my 13-year-old's not even in her brain yet how the car actually moves. At some point, she gets to 15, she's gonna be thinking about the fact that, oh my gosh, you have a clutch. There's 3 pedals and only 2 feet. She's gonna become painfully aware of how she does not know how to drive a car. And even more aware when she's actually sitting in the driver's seat at 16 and I say, put the car into gear. Now, that will be an opportunity, I think, for real directive teaching. I think there is a place for it. I think it'd be irresponsible to say, what do you want to do? And set my 16-year-old out with a car. But hear me right. Is she moves from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. Remember, again, as you started figuring out how to drive, you go, okay, adjust the mirror, hands at 10 and 2, first gear, are my lights on? And every little thing is like, crazy, even when you're moving really slow. And yet, you think about how masterful you've become now at driving, to the point where sometimes entire portions of the drive you completely forget or miss because your unconscious mind has been trained, programmed how to get you where you want to go. You might not even remember half the drive to work this morning, for example, because you become unconsciously competent. You've gotten to that level. So one of the things that coaching does, because we're asking questions and the brain can't help but answer the question that's being asked of it, is the brain is working on solutions all the time. And that unconscious mind can really start to work and come up with solutions. In fact, one of the big things is to actually not try. You know, for example, once you get good at driving, then it might be, okay, well, now I want to switch gears more smoothly. And I might just try to be consciously aware, not of how to do it right. That's one way of doing it. Another way might be, well, what does smooth feel like or look like? And not trying necessarily to be smooth, but just thinking about what a smooth would be like. We almost always find that we will make that progress by asking ourselves those type of questions. That would be an example of self-coaching there. One of the challenges, of course, is that when we become unconsciously competent is the fact that we do some things wrong. And if we're doing things wrong, that would be another opportunity to start that cycle all over again as we become unconsciously incompetent. We're doing something wrong. And so we have to become consciously incompetent again to once we've identified that and try to shift it over to conscious competence and eventually get that to unconscious competence again. So the 4 learning stages there. I should probably have a handout. Maybe I'll try to attach that later.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. It reminds me very much of I'm imagining in my mind a situational leadership quadrant. Kind of, right. 4 squares to move through there. Interesting. So I guess 2 questions and one quick, and then another one kind of shifting, maybe a different topic is, how do you know, Trent, or what do you use, I guess to diagnose whether now is an appropriate time for directive learning? Like I need to step in and show the way versus allowing the self-directed learning process to happen.
So if you're here, right, the question is, how do I discern whether it's time for coaching or I need to step out of coaching and get into more of a mentoring type of role?
Yeah.
Now, it might help me to hear some specific scenarios maybe that you've been struggling with as you've been trying to do more of a coaching leader stuff. Because for the most part, I've really actually been trying to shift almost exclusively into the coaching type of mode. And yet there are times, even within a coaching call, where I will ask permission to step out of the coaching call and get into more of a directive mode. I only do so with permission. It's almost always given, but at least I'm still asking permission to step out of the process. So for example, specifically, the coaching process involves the acrostic GROW. There's a goal, right, an objective I want to accomplish on this call. There's reality, where we try to get the facts and what's really happening. And once we've kind of uncovered all that earth, then we start to brainstorm options. What are the options that are possible for us to act on? Before deciding which one to necessarily move on, let's just get everything on the table. I will tell you that the final one is way forward. We actually choose, specifically chooses one or two, maybe three, to specifically move on. Now, I want to go back to O for a second, options, because that's very often where I'm finding myself, or at least initially here, stepping out of the coaching role and into more of a directive role. So for example, if we're talking with somebody that's trying to improve their health, and they brainstormed all these ways that they could do it. Let's say that they've come up with exercise options, they've come up with nutrition options, they've even come up with different things that they can do with stress, but they haven't necessarily addressed something that coach would absolutely help. In this case, it would be something like sleep has a massive effect on your ability to not only regulate your own weight, but also blood pressure, etc. So that's where I'll ask permission. I might ask a question or two that might see, hey, what else is there? But if they're not getting to it, as opposed to manipulating them towards a, hey, can you think of anything like that involves your bed? That's a manipulative question. So rather than just trying to lead them to that, I'm trying to ask more open-ended questions while coaching. I'll just ask permission instead. Hey, can I ask permission to step out of the coaching role for just a moment here? Something that people often do, something that's commonly not understood, is that the amount of sleep that you get can actually have a massive impact on your health. If you're doing everything right in terms of exercise and even nutrition, but you're not getting enough sleep, your body might actually fight to stay the same weight. So if you're trying to gain weight, that's a problem. If you're trying to lose weight, that can be a problem. So without making a judgment, and I don't want you to put more weight on this one necessarily because I'm suggesting it here, but let's put one of the options here with your permission is amount of sleep and sleep habits specifically. And that's where I'll step back into a coaching role and really give the participant an opportunity then for them to pick which one that they're going to choose to move forward on, or ones that they're going to choose to move forward on. So that would be just an example that I'm finding right now. Is there a specific example you could present me, and I'll perhaps let you know maybe there's a way you can actually coach through it, or hey, you know what, that's actually appropriate for us. It's more of a mentoring type of directive type teaching here.
Sure. And I guess almost what I'm thinking is going back to the foundational pillars. You're saying, hey, the recipient needs to be resourceful, creative, whole. They have to have the answers. I guess the thought of mine is, if you're sitting there and to use your example of, hey, this person doesn't have one of the potential answers of sleep, that's where you may feel an appropriate momentarily step in, put them with the info that they need, step back out into the coaching role. Is that what I'm hearing is the way you address that? How you do to bring that up?
Yeah, so if I get stuck, I'm still using directive teaching occasionally as a coach, but it really is a last resort. It's not the first thing I reach for. In fact, as I made the transition, that was probably the most difficult transition, was resisting that urge when I see a clear path, a clear solution that has worked for me. The challenge with that, and I'm really glad that the challenge with that is I can only present to them the best option that's ever worked for me. The reality is that may or may not be the best option for this individual. When we say that the participant is creative, they're resourceful, and they're whole, that assumes that they are the expert in their life. They've been around them more than anybody. And while I might be able to help them with a new perspective as a coach, the reality is I don't necessarily know what's going to work best for them. Certainly not as much as they do. So in that scenario, I'm kind of limiting them with my solutions if I'm going to go directive. Whereas they might be able to come up with, by me asking questions and them accessing their unconscious mind, they actually might come up with a solution that's even better, that could even work better for me. And that's part of the miracle of coaching here, is that now we're really, with this designed alliance, coming up with two minds to come up with the best possible process, the best possible solutions for this person in particular.
Yeah. And to honor your request of an example, I'm going to think of an everyday example for a district manager. I think of maybe at a phone jam, For an example, walking around, encouraging people, and you overhear one of the calls. Maybe you're crouching down listening or from a distance, whatever it might be. But, you hear a representative get off the approach, or you hear a representative not handle an objection appropriately or lay down on the call, whatever it might be, that leads to the outcome of not getting an appointment.
Okay.
And I think about before this phone call, my gut, reaction is to step in and say, ask a permission question like, hey, do you mind if I give you a tip? And saying, hey, here's what I heard. This is that, and then sharing, if you do blank, you're going to find it to be more effective. Do you see why that is? Okay, great. Let's follow the approach a little more closely on that next call. If I'm thinking about this like I'm coaching Caitlin to play golf, use your example.
Yeah.
A new way to, I guess, to make sure I got this right, if not, you correct me. If I'm stepping up to that conversation, it's more starting with a, hey, what happened? I did, they were busy or whatever it was. And then continue to ask questions there to have the answer come from them as opposed to from you.
Well, in fact, I think I'd encourage you to even see, by the way, let me encourage you this way. Just the fact that you are asking permission is a very high form of mentoring. It's a very sophisticated version, and I'd encourage all district managers to start at least with that. Part of the challenge is that the participants very often aren't even aware that there's a problem. So I would encourage district managers to ask questions to help them identify what happened, and to do it in such a way that we're not putting them in a position to be defensive. For example, what happened? May put them on the defensive, right? Hey, what happened there? I'm doing what you showed me. They might not be doing anything close to what we showed them. But again, perception is kind of reality here. I might say, hey, I've been listening in here. I have some thoughts. Would you be open to hearing them? That might be a new form of even asking permission. Hey, what do you think happened there? Didn't get the appointment. Can you think of what we could learn from that call that you might want to do differently next time? Or what are some possible ways that you can handle that objection? Or what are you noticing that you are doing or not doing that's working well? I might even start with, hey, what do you think you did great on that call? I'll do this very often with kids on the, unfortunately, I'm not in the field like you guys are, so I have to find other ways to apply this on a daily basis. You guys are so blessed to be able to actually just step in your office every single day. You've got a laboratory where you could constantly be coaching people. I mean, every single day. Instead, when I'm coaching kids on the ice at hockey practice, it's, hey, you turned the puck over there. What do you think happened? What do you think led to that? Well, I skated and I made a deke and it worked. I made another move and it worked. And then I made another move and it didn't work. I said, well, what do you think you need to do differently next time? Oh, I should probably pass it after the second one. Is way better than, dude, why didn't you pass after the first one? Way different response. Directive, right? But by asking questions, hey, helping them become consciously aware of what actually happened, so kind of get the reality and have them kind of become consciously aware of what that is. Very often, they're already prescribing their own solution. Hey, I noticed that you're not really using the script. Can you tell me some of your thoughts around what you are doing? So and again, it's not designed here for us to, kind of be right. One of our challenges is that at least I was, as a district manager, very often trying to show that I was right. If you do what I show you, you'll get results. And if you don't do what I show you, I don't will fail because I'm always right. That's not really a coaching approach. In fact, it's kind of a bit of a manipulative approach. At least it was for me. It wasn't my intention. But again, I was just trying to get results. I was trying to do what was best for them. And I was kind of approaching it with an end justifies the means.
Yeah. And I guess my question is, Trent, in that situation, of a phone jam, because I'm stepping to the rep and initiating a conversation, can you even call that a coaching conversation? Since So it's me initiating, it's me recognizing, regardless of whether it's gone through with questions or not. Maybe that's where we feel like we're forcing with questions as opposed to inviting or opening a conversation or discovery.
It should be stated this, that one of the basic tenets of coaching is curiosity. So instead of trying to be right, I'm trying to actually be curious. If for no other reason than to at least get as much information as possible. Because the average district manager, if they had enough information, actually probably could troubleshoot much better than what they're doing right now. When we make assumptions, right, we know where that goes. Very often I'm misdiagnosing, I'm getting it wrong. If I adopt a position of curiosity, hey, tell me more about that call. It didn't work. Yeah, weird. Where do you think we lost it? No. Hey, let's acknowledge that some people, no matter what we do, we're not gonna set up no matter what. All right, so let's acknowledge that one. But and let's assume that no matter what we do, somebody's gonna set up no matter what either. Those are the two weird extremes, right? So in between there, though, we've got some influence. And what do you think we could have done to influence that more? What else? And I'll ask what else a lot. I'll try to go deep and help them become deeper, consciously aware, deeper of what's really going on. Hey, I'm not really sounding confident. Hey, why do you think you're not sounding confident? Well, I've gotten some no's today. Okay. So maybe our mindset is a little wounded right now. What else? Well, I'm not really flowing with it. Hey, how come you think you're not flowing so well? I don't really know what I'm going to say every time. And why don't you think you know what you're going to say every time? Well, because I'm trying to make it fresh and new every single time I make a call. So that's why I'm not using the approach. Okay, so what you're saying is that you're making it fresh and new, and on one side that might make it fresh and new, on the other side that might make it so you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, or you sound maybe unconfident at times. Could that be the case? Now, that might sound directed, but the reality is you're kind of feeding back to them, and as you're feeding that back to them, you are trying to clarify. It's an active listening engagement. It's a process of actually trying to figure out what they're saying, but it's also trying to illuminate them as we're figuring this out too. It's a new perspective. And that is absolutely appropriate as a coach. It's actually part of our responsibility is to create some more conscious awareness for them.
Yeah.
Different perspectives, yeah.
Okay. Great. Next thing I'm thinking here is I find myself often trying to guide a question from thinking that the feeling I get is I'm more like closing the conversation and closing the wrap on a plan of action. So it's opening a conversation. I think about on a Sunday sitting down for PC with a rep. We've gone 0 for 5 the previous week. And for me, in my mind, I'm immediately going to, okay, either the wrong customers are sitting in front of, they don't have their clothes memorized, or it's a product conviction issue, or a combo of those things. Mm-hmm. Let me ask questions to figure out maybe which is going on, and then lead the rep to the solution. As I'm going through that process, you start to sense in the other person that it's almost like obvious what you're doing. Right. You're asking a question in a way where there is a right answer. Right. And it shifts from supposed to finding a solution. They're just trying to find the answer that's going to appease you and maybe end the conversation.
They'll yes you. And they will. And I've yesed people, and I know you've yesed, and I'm probably not done yesing people. I was going to say whatever I need to end this conversation right now because this isn't comfortable for me. I'm being manipulated. And that's kind of one of the ways to get out of it. In fact, it's the least combative way to get out of that conflict, that conflict. We might ask questions like, hey, so do you want to do your own thing or do you want to succeed? And in our mind, we gave them a choice, but in that case, choice is not a choice, and that is an example of a manipulative question. Well, then I've asked, hey, you can go to the conference or you can fail. What do you want to do? Or what do you think the right decision is? That's not a question. It's an indictment. And sometimes we'll dress up in a question an actual statement. And I think some of our intention here does matter.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question for me then. How do you create the safety in a conversation so that a rep becomes more open, trusting, disarmingly honest about what happened? Because sometimes when manager sits there with a rep who's gone 0 for 5. It's like in the manager's mind, and maybe they've got such conviction. It's at times I've been tempted, and I've certainly seen other managers say, I wonder if this rep is even being truthful about completing demos.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question is, when you start to feel that sense of the representative isn't giving you all the information, or it's not consistent with what you anticipate being solutions, I guess there's two parts. One, how do you check yourself in that moment? And then two, how do you create that safety in the conversation so the rep does become more open and trusting on how they're feeling, what's happening, what's happened, willing to admit a mistake and not fear a judgment or retribution or whatever, the hammer of accountability, whatever you feel like they're anticipating to follow.
I'm not sure I caught your question in there, brother.
So I'll try and restate more concisely. How do you create the safety in a conversation with the rep so they feel comfortable being open, even willing to admit a mistake or a failure or a fall, in order to having that disarmingly honest conversation is what I'm looking for.
Okay. How do I have a disarmingly honest conversation with somebody to the point where they're comfortable sharing, and perhaps even sharing intimately to the point where they're even willing to admit that they made a mistake or they messed up? Okay.
That's it.
Did I get that?
Yep, that's it.
So thought number one, a lot of times for me, pragmatically, I default when it comes to building relationships down to setting it up right in the first place. In my mind, that trust is built over time and trust is earned. So trust is built over time and it's earned. So in my experience, there's got to be a risk and trust type of scenario here. They risk a little bit of information with me, and I, based on how I handle that, will determine whether they'll risk more information or not. So if they bring something to me that is honest, like, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late for the meeting, and I bring the hammer, it may have been beneficial in that moment to bring, or I should say permissible to bring the hammer in that moment, but not beneficial. That actually might risk trust going forward. I'm not suggesting that I'm a pushover that can't have a difficult conversation with somebody or won't hold them accountable to certain behavior. But at the end of the day, how I handle their heart in that moment may actually be more important than the actual behavior itself. So with the 1 minute manager here, I'm setting things up in very clear, no uncertain terms, specifically what is expected of somebody, what good behavior looks like. And I'm also setting up, hey, when the behavior isn't good, here's what it's going to look like. Here's how we'll handle it together. I'll even ask permission in that moment. Hey, does this sound reasonable to you? Does this sound like something that we can agree to? Like, yeah. So setting it up in no uncertain terms. They call that the 1 minute goal setting. The second part also, though, does increase trust, and that is the 1 minute praisings. And again, it would be very simple to underestimate the power of catching people do something right. It says so many things, including, this person has my best interest in mind. This person notices. This person makes me feel strong. This person's helpful. This person can be trusted. So catch them doing something right. And the key there is that it's got to be specific. It's got to be real. It can't be, hey, you're awesome. It's got to be, hey, I really like the way that you read that paragraph there. Like, you brought a lot of meaning to the specific words that made sense, and it actually communicated a really good feel. Nice. Good job. Being specific with praise helps them to repeat it. But it also, again, it's more intimate. It's more real to them. It's certainly more relevant. As we build that up, when ultimately the difficult conversations do come, and they do in any relationship where you're leading people, at least you've earned a right. You've hopefully earned some trust. You can be honest with them even to the point where I might even express my feelings, my honest feelings. So let's use that example of being late again. When somebody's late, hey, I'm glad you're here. Listen, stay a few minutes afterwards. We'll catch up. One of the things we do set up is, hey, anytime somebody's late for a meeting, I assume you have a perfectly good reason. Now, hear me right, because I'm a good coach. I'm gonna want to hear that good reason. But listen, we're gonna treat you with dignity and respect. I'm not gonna put you on the front street in the meeting. So when someone comes in late, hey, Andrew, I'm glad you're here. Let's grab a seat. We'll catch you up, okay? Hey, we'll get a few minutes afterwards, all right? Afterwards, I will sit down with you and I'll say, Andrew, I noticed that you're late today. In fact, you've been late a few times the last few weeks. In fact, how many times would you say you've been late? At least 5 or 10 minutes. You give me that answer, okay. Because I care about you, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. Now, Andrew, I mentioned earlier when someone comes late, I perceive that nonverbal communication as being, this just isn't important enough to me. If it were, I would be here on time. Now, it doesn't even matter if that's how you feel about it. I've presented to you that this is how I feel about it, and I am leading you. So in this scenario, you've been late, and I always mention that I think you would have a good reason for being late, and I would assume that. I'd like to hear that reason. Why did you miss the first 10 minutes of the meeting? I was late because of traffic. Okay. So traffic happens all the time here in the city that we live in. So really what you're saying is you didn't give yourself enough time. Is that a more accurate description of what really happened? Now again, this is not necessarily a coaching type of discussion. You following here? This is a directed teaching moment, right? So I am actually taking the lead here. And I'm not trying to manipulate them. I am trying to show them my perspective. But if the question is, how can we have an honest conversation? This is an honest conversation. I'm actually expressing my frustration with their behavior. Not with them as a person. I'm trying real hard here not to threaten their personal okayness. I certainly am taking to task their behavior. And I'll be explicit about that. Hey, somebody's late here that really frustrates me. I'm working hard to work on that as my own character flaw, but I can tell you that I really care a lot about you. In fact, I care too much about you to just let this type of behavior go unchecked. What are our options going forward to ensure that you make it here on time every time? Because I don't think you want to be remembered as the guy who always had an excuse for being late. I think you want to be remembered as the guy that always is here on time. So if that is the case, and we're right about you, what are our options? What are your options to make sure that you're always here at least 10, 15 minutes early? Why don't you list some, and I'll help you do that. That might be more of a coaching type of process again. Even though it's a very mentoring type of relationship moment, a very directive type of teaching moment, I can still employ the coaching process so that, again, the best comes from them, and I'm not just hammering them with all the reasons that they need to come on time. And also, when we partner in this 1 minute reprimand, it helps them kind of determine that they've got some power still in this.
Yeah.
Trying to leave them with some dignity as we're having even a difficult conversation.
Yeah. So, to get further on this route, holding people accountable. This is often a leadership academy or leadership institute or manager training, whatever you would call it. Topic you'll see on agendas. And a lot of times we say, managers don't step up enough to accountability conversations. But I know the past reading areas for years, I've defined accountability as when people mess up, you point it out and don't cut down on that. You're tough, quote unquote, as being accountable, holding people accountable.
Sure.
The way I felt, putting myself in the rep's shoes, hearing you just talking to me, it felt you were tough on the behavior, not willing to back down when I lobbed the traffic example, right, when that was lobbed out. The behavior wasn't excused, but you were constantly communicating why you weren't excusing the behavior. And it was because I want to see you do well, because I want you to be remembered this way, not this way. And showing benefits to them and consequences, so to speak, that they would be in agreement to. So I guess what is your best advice on communicating with both care and candor in a way where you're able to talk about exactly what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
There's no subject that isn't off limits, but I guess the words you use are handle the heart.
Sure.
In a way where people don't feel judged or you're personally attacking them.
Sure. I'm going to confess again that philosophically, I've gleaned all of these ideas from the 1 Minute Manager. This is straight from Kenneth Blatchard's book. The 1 minute goal setting, the 1 minute praising, the 1 minute reprimand are straight from the book. Now, I may have taken a little deeper, but I believe that the nuggets are actually there. If you are listening to this and you're watching this, you really want to go deeper in how I set up relationships, coach them along the way, and then actually have difficult conversations with them. I believe that that would be probably the greatest resource available to you, even more than watching this a second time. Tough on behavior, soft on people. So, for example, anytime I've had a leader that has had the shot and they haven't taken it, that actually engenders trust. Specifically, what I'm asking myself all the time with my leaders is, does this person really have my best interest in mind? And in that moment where I was late, I was exposed, they had the shot and they didn't just bury me, they actually worked with me. It actually proves what they were saying. And what I'm hoping that they're saying to me is, I'm committed to you, your progress, your growth. So committed, I'm not going to allow spinach in your teeth to just go unchecked. We're actually going to, I'll tell you, hey, you got spinach in your teeth. I'll bring it to you. I'm only going to cut as much as I need to. Sometimes it's going to be painful. In fact, for us to really grow, it has to be painful. But when going to surgery, I'm going to bring a scalpel, not an axe. And I mention that because there's many leaders out there that are, let me call them more like managers, right? They're not really leading, they're managing. And they've got the shot and they take it and it feels good. I mentioned earlier the idea of permissible versus beneficial. It may be permissible to take the shot, especially because they've offended you and emotionally you want to reach out and sting them back. But the reality is that does damage. It's permissible, but almost never beneficial to take that shot, especially if the goal is to ultimately build trust and advance the plot for this person, to move the needle on their growth and development. So yes, I'm hard on behavior, especially when it's wrong. Keep in mind, I've earned the right to do that because I've been super positive on positive behavior. I've reinforced what was specifically great. So I've earned a platform, I believe. So hey, if I saw something even, would you want to know about it? When we're doing 1 minute goal setting, hey, if you had spinach in your teeth, would you rather me tell you about it, or would you rather just kind of discover it on your own much later? Again, that's one of those closed-ended questions, but what I'm trying to establish in that moment here is, because I care about you, we'll eventually have difficult conversations. The way I would finish that 1 minute reprimand, though, would be basically like this. Hey, Andrew, listen, I might even say it at the beginning of the conversation. Hey, when we're done this thing, we're going to hug it out. We're going to be fine. We got some difficult part we're going to go through right now. But at the end, I hope we get to hug it out. That's my intention here. All right, here's a difficult conversation. And then when we're done, hey, Andrew, listen, my style here is when I forgive, I don't bury the hatchet with the handle sticking out. I will forgive and forget that this moment even happened. Now, of course, the next time that you're late, if you're late, I'm going to be forced to remember, and the next conversation will be more severe. Does that sound fair to you? So I'm asking permission here in this case, and this, again, implied is accountability, in my opinion, only works when permission is granted, when power has been granted, which is why I'm always asking for that permission ahead of time. Hey, I'd like permission to hold you accountable. I'd like to earn your trust, right? But so far, so good. Can I ask permission to have a difficult conversation with you? Again, the eye is always towards restoration and building the person up, not beats, not punitive, not, hey, this is time for me to whack you so I feel better about myself. I'm frustrated and I'm going to take it out on you, right? If we're shepherding people, the one job of a shepherd is you can't beat the sheep. It's the number one job. It's that simple. So if we're really in charge of our people and their growth and moving them forward, then anytime those difficult conversations happen, that needs to be with an eye towards restoration growth, development. Permission.
Excellent. Trent, we are 5 minutes past the hour. I guess we started about the same. This is excellent. I think what we've got here, and I know I've already had a couple people texting me saying they had to jump on a call or whatever it might be midway through, and they're excited to get the chapter 2 on recording. So I just want to say thank you for taking some time for me for a topic I was interested in and committed to getting better at, and I feel like I've got some clarity and tools here to immediately implement. I've got a couple calls coming up later today, and one-on-one calls, and I'm just thinking about how much better those can go based on the past hour. And appreciate you for taking some time and sharing, and again, appreciation to Jake Kuhn for getting this back out. This could be one that definitely could be listened to more than once. I'd like to give you a chance if you'd like any parting shots, or if there's an additional point, something you feel it deserves to be included with the rest of this for posterity's sake. If there's something else you'd like to put in.
Andrew, I appreciate the opportunity just to be able to share some of these ideas on the power of coaching leader. This is something that I have a lot of passion about, and certainly could talk more about in the future. But the pleasure today has been all mine. So thank you for taking initiative with the boss calls and getting these things going again. I realize that some might be more calls as opposed to this the new tech of the new videos. But thank you for an opportunity to share some of these ideas and be able to get it recorded for our archives. Appreciate it, man.
Awesome. You're very welcome, my friend, and to everybody else, have a great, wonderful Tuesday. All of you on recording, whatever day it